What is up, everybody, and welcome to the FTN Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Vlad Sedler, and today I'm joined by another Matt, a very, very special co-host, a member of the FTN Fantasy Baseball team, the DFS team, the Bets team, and the resident closer, relief pitcher expert of all things. It's the Cupmeister himself, Mr. Matt Kupferle. What's going on, Matt?
Nothing, man. Just waiting for some spring weather. We put some mulch down today in the yard like a good middle-aged man does. And I am pining for some warmer weather. It is not super warm here in the Midwest yet, so I am hoping it warms up soon because that's when I feel like baseball's into full gear. And I am tired of 40 to 50 degrees and cold blowing winds. So I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah, I'm here obviously on the West Coast. We're recording on late evening on Tuesday, April 20th, right? The 20th?
That's right. 19th.
19th. Okay, yeah. 420 is Wednesday when you guys will probably be listening. But I don't worry as much about the weather here, obviously in California, but it does kind of catch you by surprise because one day we'll be in the 50s. And the next day in the 90s. And you just kind of, almost have to look in advance to know if it's a day where you got to wear like a long sleeve and a sweater or a t-shirt. But for me, most of all, I'm just really annoyed by all the rainouts, especially when it comes to DFS. And of course, with two-star pitchers, because it really sort of screws things up. And then obviously we lost Shane Bieber start on Tuesday and had a couple of the double headers. And it's just been really wild on the weather front.
Yeah, it's a lot of fantasy baseball Twitter, requesting all dome stadiums, which I don't think we're going to see in our lifetime for sure. But I get it. It's frustrating, especially when you put all that time and prep into figuring out two-start guys, who to line up, and then Mother Nature wreaks havoc on everything. So unfortunately, we're going to get probably a lot of that for the next 3 to 4 weeks, and then hopefully we'll be smooth sailing from there. So
yeah, and then of course when we do most of our damage, or AKA put our work together on the weekend. I'm usually doing the FAAB article I'm starting it on Friday nights and most of Saturday mornings before games have started. And so by the time Sunday comes around, and one of the reasons why I have to do a Sunday update is because so much shifts over the weekend. Somebody grabs a save and all of a sudden closer rankings and change. And of course your weekly pitching article that you start on early in the weekend as well. And same thing, by the time the weekend ends already, things are changing as far as the outlook. And then of course you got now Atlanta going to like a 5-man rotation, I think, with them sending down Huascar Noah. Angels still rolling with the six-man rotation there as well, although it does look like Michael Lorenzen may end up getting a 2-start week next week. We'll see if that holds up. How's your season going so far, or early start to the season? I hear you got a bunch of Dodgers.
Yeah, not great. I mean, a little bit rough here and there. It feels like I'm still getting myself into fantasy baseball season. Not sure that I have a team. I was just pulling it up as I looked. I mean, I've got the teams that on the NFBC website that I really am focused on. I don't know that I have a team above 7th place. I told you 8th place pre-show. I was wrong by one whopping place, but I do feel like I'm in a good spot. The biggest thing for me is some teams that I had really drafted some guys for power haven't gotten there yet. And so I'm lagging a bit behind in some of those counting categories. I surprisingly was very high on Garrett Cole to start the year, which shows how smart I am. And I only have 1 share of him, which feels good for now, but we'll see how it goes. That was a weird start today that he really struggled in. So, we'll see how that goes. I'm quicker on pitchers than I am hitters. I usually give hitters to about May 1st. I'll be honest. It's Cole's 3rd start, so it's about a 10th of his year already. It's a bit concerning, especially if you invested a 1st-round pick, right?
Yeah, and it's obviously we'll talk about it a little bit as far as hitters, pitchers starting off cold, starting off hot, and really, I mean, there's still 90% of the season to go. I mean, we see it every single season. And I feel like, and I'm talking about overreaction, and I feel like the folks that have played longer, that are more disciplined, they sort of see these things every single year. The hot start by Yerman Mercedes to the beginning of last year, like as who is this year's Yerman Mercedes, aka the guy that's going to fall off the map with the hot start? Is it a Stephen Kwan, or does he have long-term value? Is it his teammate Owen Miller? Is it Taylor Ward? We'll talk about those guys in a bit, but real quick, just kind of covering some of the injury news, some players recovering. Ronald Acuna, he is beginning a rehab assignment, began it on Tuesday, going to make his way back, is not going to be in the outfield or playing in the outfield when he does return right away, but promising, right? I mean, we hope there are no setbacks and everything looks good and we can get some Ronnie baseball going.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, I think maybe Vlad, you and I have chatted about it. If we haven't, I know I've talked with, longtime Braves fan, Brian Vogel, for those that know him. I believe I caught up with your buddy, Scott Genstad, about Acuna as well. My personal anecdote on Acuna is, I don't have a ton of Acuna right now. And that's more related to a personal experience. When my wife was in college, she played soccer and softball in college, and she actually tore ACL, MCL, and PCL in college. And basically, she was not a home run hitter like Ronald Acuna, but obviously Acuna steals a lot of bags. My wife said it took her basically, obviously, a full year of rehab and then a full year of playing for her to get her burst, speed, etc. Now that's probably a poor analogy. It's apples and bowling balls comparing a Division II athlete to a Major League Baseball player. But I will say, I think there's some truth there. So I think for the folks that drafted Acuna, it's certainly encouraging news. There's nothing but getting excited about it. I'm really curious to see what his level is, because he's ready to come back. He wants to come back with a splash. I tell you, I'm concerned about speed. It looks like they're targeting May 9th with no setbacks for him to come back. So about 2 weeks. They said they give him a little bit longer rehab than normal, which makes a ton of sense to get his timing back, maybe almost 3 weeks. But I would tell you, I hope you built teams for those Acuna owners that are counting on the 10 to 20 steals. I don't know that he's a 30 steal guy, but that's just my personal take.
Yeah.
And friends that have ripped up that knee, it's really hard. It takes a year to get back. So that's kind of what I'm counting on. I don't know. Do you own a lot of Acuna? And what were your thoughts going through with him?
So I drafted a couple. There was just like a little 2-week period where he was falling late in the first round. And this is when we were just, right off on the heels of the good news, maybe about a month and a half before the season, when it appeared that he was going to start the year with the team. And, or at least, some people thought. And so, I have a couple, mostly on draft champions. I did not target him in main events and in online championships just because of the price. And I've just become less risk averse or more risk averse over the years, and just sort of building some of my rosters, at least the main events, more like cash game DFS, sure, as opposed to the tournaments. Yeah. But I do have some Buxton, and he's obviously we want to see him healthy for a full season, but that already is not happening because he missed a couple of games, still out with that knee. Should be back at some point this week. This is probably something we're going to be sweating all year, right? All the Buxton folks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. If you're not excited about watching Byron Buxton play, one of the things I think you and I have chatted about is this is for fun, right? I love watching Byron Buxton play baseball. There's nobody, I don't have a ton of him. There's nobody I root harder for than I want Byron Buxton to be a freaking mega star. It's going to be interesting to see. I'm curious as to if on his return, does he slot into a DH role and they let Nick Gordon play center field, which is obviously, you can't replace, Byron Buxton's defense. He's an amazing defender. How do they handle his workload? Does he get an extra day or two back? The injury, when I watched it live, it looked like a regular slide. He just slid into the base, and then his, whatever happened. And he was, quoted, I think, as saying, I felt it pop. But the good news is, I don't know if he, popped scar tissue or what. It doesn't seem as bad as it could have been, obviously. So super exciting to hear. Hopefully he's back by the weekend or next week. But I think for everybody, whether you own him or you don't own him, it's awesome to see, hopefully, him back in the lineup for the Twins.
A couple other hitters here in the mix. You got Jose Altuve dealing with a knee issue, and he's having an MRI done on Tuesday. Or had an MRI on Tuesday. We'll see if he's going to be okay or if he's going to hit the IL. Probably see a little bit more of Aledmys Diaz, who is a nice hitter against left-handed pitching if for whatever reason Altuve does miss time. And then I've got AJ Pollock for the White Sox coming back, supposed to be on Friday. He's been dealing with a hamstring injury. Another hamstring injury, Jonathan India. He hits the IL along with teammate veteran Mike Moustakas. Right bicep strain for him. And then one more note on a hitter, Connor Wong, the only backstop left in Boston. Both Christian Vasquez, Kevin Plawicki, the Boston duo there, catchers, both on COVID IL. So anything interesting there or affecting you?
Yeah. Only one quick note for me on the Aledmus Diaz train. When he is getting at bats, he's kind of moved all over the place. Second base, shortstop, left field. But for me in that lineup, he's been batting 6th or 7th, which is interesting, right? We've all been pining for this Kyle Tucker love because he's a star. And for whatever reason, I don't know if Dusty Baker just hates him or what's going on, but that guy cannot break into the top of the lineup. Very intrigued if Aledmus Diaz with, assuming Altuve is out for a period of time, can he slot into a 6th spot in the order and get a run producing role? Because as we saw last night, you asked me about my teams. Of course, I benched Jordan Alvarez this week. I didn't see the news. I was busy with work on Monday. I missed the 2 home runs that happened. If he's back, that provides some additional depth to that lineup. And I really like Diaz if he can slot in, especially as you mentioned, he just pounds left-handed pitching. So that to me, of the guys that you mentioned, is probably the most interesting thing for news and notes that I'm watching are those hitters.
And then we'll just end it on the note of a few pitchers here. You got Steven Strasburg. Hopefully folks did not invest too much in him outside of maybe some draft champions where you didn't have that many stashes at the point when you were drafting him, usually around the 22nd round. He's still not facing live hitters, not sure exactly when he'll be back, so let's not hold our breath there. Unfortunate news, Alex Cobb appeared to be a hamstring or growing injury, and he was pulled from his start, gave up a couple of runs before leaving in the 4th. Right adductor strain is what they say. Apparently it's minor, and hopefully will just be on IL for the minimum stay. In the meanwhile, by the way, I tweeted 3 minutes before that happened, and I know there's obviously no connection. I'm not trying to say like I'm kind of see the future, but I tweeted out my top player exposure right beforehand. And you know what? Sometimes it's just a little, it is a little too much. Like, I mean, nobody loves like, April victory laps, but like my guys are smashing right now. Got all the Brandon Belt and, Tanner Rainey saves and Taylor Rogers saves. And you just kind of sometimes feel like gloating. It is usually bad luck because Alex Cobb was in that list. That happened. But in my tweet, I pointed out that I have 10 Tyler Beede shares across basically most of my draft champions. And he's in the mix consideration for that spot. We'll see. It's him, maybe Sammy Long. Not sure who else can come and grab it, but at least one turn, maybe 2, someone will be in there for Cobb.
Yeah, and especially if you're in a any kind of best ball format, that could really pay off for you. And all he needs is an opportunity, right? I mean, he's a mega prospect. It's funny. I couldn't remember if it was you, Vlad, that tweeted or somebody else, but I thought, what kind of voodoo devil magic is going on in San Francisco that they turned Alex Cobb into Kevin Gausman from last year? Because that he looks outstanding. Increased velocity. That split piece was dancing for sure. So such a shame. Hopefully you're right. Hopefully he's back with the minimum stint. I would tell you that injury, it's like an oblique. And honestly, it scares me a bit because you don't know how long that groin's going to bother him. Is he going to change mechanics because he's got residual pain in there? I would tell you as a pitcher, anything, can throw you off. And so if that even makes a slight mechanics tweak, you hope it doesn't. But a good call on Tyler Beede. It could be, I hope it's not, but it could be a longer thing. And especially if he shows up well, he's kind of got that long relief slot-ish. He could pay off. Those DC shares could be awesome. So
let's talk a little bit about hitters that are off to cold starts. And of course, depending on the format, of course, there comes a certain point where there is always someone out there, especially the shallower the league, the better, the more it makes sense to kind of keep guys churning and burning, right? I mean, if there's somebody that was already sort of a fringe borderline guy in a 10 or 12 teamer, and you see the opportunity to what you assume is an upgrade, sometimes you got to jump on the opportunity, especially if that hitter, for example, gets a higher slot in the lineup, or they're no longer a platoon guy now. They're hitting every day because they're performing well, or they have an upcoming phenomenal series and some good ballparks coming up. But on the flip side, we do have to be careful. Guys that we have invested in that we've dropped, we got to remember it's 30, 40 plate appearances so far for some of these guys. And you just don't cut bait right away on people that you've spent the time, have invested in, players that have performed over the course of their careers. At some point, the ebbs will flow and the flows will ebb, and that's the case with some of these guys. Just kind of starting off the top, Kyle Tucker. I mean, yeah, he's ice cold right now. He had a 2 home run game, I think, about a week ago. But outside of that, he's just striking out a lot. He's not getting the opportunity to hit higher in the lineup. He might now with Altuve if Altuve is going to be out. But I mean, you don't just trade Kyle Tucker if you're in a trade league for a borderline first round pick or a first round pick for you're not selling low. You're not selling trading him for Marcus. Marcus Semien is a bad example, but you know what I mean. Like you're not trading him for someone that was available in a draft 4 to 5 rounds later just because he's off to a slow start. Same thing, Franmil Reyes. You're probably not going to be dropping him for Satsugo or for whomever is off to a nice start. So any thoughts on those two guys specifically, Kyle Tucker, Franmil Reyes? Anything in their profiles you're seeing earlier that you're worried about? Hit an injury? Anything at all?
No, actually, I'm with you there. I think for the equity invested and just the skill set. I mean, Kyle Tucker's the one, right? The batted ball data stands out. It looks fine. It just looks unlucky a bit. So no, nothing I'm super worried about with either one of those guys right now.
One guy, and he's actually on the TV on this Tuesday evening as I'm watching. I did play Max Fried in DFS against my Dodgers once I saw that the lineup that came out. And hopefully I didn't just jinx that. They're in the 5th inning. But yeah, I saw the lineup without a bunch of guys there. Fried coming off a couple of mediocre starts. I'm like, you know what? It's time to roll them out. I can kind of feel it when my Dodgers are cold. But one of the guys in that lineup has 1 hit. He's literally the worst hitter in baseball right now, and that's Eddie Rosario. Eddie the Eagle, NLCS MVP, right? And last season, playoff hero, just 1 hit. I don't know, man. Like, I understand some bad plate discipline. He doesn't walk a lot, but at some point he's going to be warm and leading off in that lineup. I mean, at some point Acuna will be back and he won't, but I mean, there's really no reason to be dropping Eddie the Eagle in 12 teamers right now. Or do you disagree?
No, I would agree. And you can look at the lineup construction right now, right? And he's batting 5th, I believe, tonight in the game, or 6th tonight in the game. I mean, he's fine. It's just one of those things. I believe it's a slow start. He was so good down the stretch last year that I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and give him a couple more weeks. But yeah, I don't think there's anything to worry about with Eddie Rosario.
Couple of Detroit Tigers, and the Tigers at some point in the season, I'm like, okay, this lineup is kind of coming together a little bit, at least from past seasons. But obviously spending all that money on Javier Baez, bringing up the kids, Spencer Torkelson, and Riley Green, who unfortunately got hurt before the season started, so we didn't get a chance to watch him grow. Going to have to wait a little bit longer for that, but I expected better things from guys like Jonathan Scope and Heimer Candelario. I mean, guys that were almost like your boring post 200 ADP guys that you think would produce at some point. But this team is ice cold right now, at least on offense. And a couple of those guys who were specifically drafting in the 150 to 200 range, who we picked up for stolen bases, are not doing so well at all. Both guys hitting under the Mendoza line. Those two guys are Akil Baddoo and Mr. Robbie Grossman. Almost called him Rex. And any thoughts on those two guys?
So I tell you, if there was one to be worried about for me, at least, it's Baddoo, and here's why. AJ Hinch has demonstrated when he was a manager with the Astros and others that he rolls with a lineup and he sticks with it. If you use Roster Resource on FanGraphs and you look at that lineup, they roll out basically the same lineup every day. It's Grossman's leading off, Meadows is second, and you can keep going down the line. The one thing that I guess gives a little bit of hope is when they're facing a righty, Baddoo is batting 6th some of the time, but he's either batting 7th or 9th when they play against lefties. So my point being, Grossman seems locked into the leadoff spot. Being a switch hitter, he's going to have the platoon advantage regardless of what it is. He seems locked into that spot. I am nervous that because of the way that they're constructing that lineup, that we're not going to see Akil Baddoo move up in the lineup. And I had really high hopes for him this year. So it's less for me about the panic about what he's done so far. It's more about the lineup construction And we've seen that it's been pretty consistent. He's been in the bottom third of that lineup. So that's how I'm viewing it, Vlad. I don't know. Are you the same way I don't think you're cutting either one, but I would say I'm more bullish on Grossman than I am on Baddoo.
Yeah, I mean, and Robbie Grossman, he was banged up a little bit. He missed 3 games over the weekend, I believe. He's back in the lineup, and at some point he'll get warm again. Of course, a little bit of an older guy, may or may not steal 20 plus bases again, and he's never going to contribute in batting average, but he is a solid bat. But we do want those stolen bases. That's kind of what we got him for. And he's a switch hitter, had been known for hitting lefties pretty well, but he's been leading off. I mean, in Tuesday's lineup, Robbie Grossman was hitting first against a righty, the day prior hitting first against the lefty. So that's how it is now. And then Baddoo, I mean, he was leading off in spring training and usually, against, I mean, he's been in the lineup against lefties as well. That really has more to do with the fact that they're just snake bit with the injuries, losing Javier Baez and Riley Green being out. They did add Austin Meadows, obviously, which was a phenomenal move. And at some point, they're going to get Derek Hill back, just somebody to keep in mind for deep 15 teamers or beyond. He is a former first-round pick from 4 scorers and 70 years ago, actually from 2014. But Derek Hill is a speedster. He's coming back from a stream hamstring. At some point, he'll be back to mess with that outfield. Again, all these guys are very similar profiles. Daz Cameron, Victor Reyes. These are powerless. I wouldn't call Daz quite powerless, but these are outfielders that have some speed, that don't walk much, and don't have much power. So all sort of similar in that regard. And yes, one of those guys gets hot, and Baddoo kind of moves down and is only hitting against righties. So we'll see. Detroit just kind of feels like an all around mess to me, and kind of like previous years.
Yep. Fair enough.
What about the rookies? So this is interesting because, man, these guys stink right now. And I'm talking about pretty much all of them, right? Talking about CJ Abrams hitting like $170, Bryson Stott for the Phillies, who was not in the lineup on Tuesday in Coors. And on Sunday, I believe he went over 5 with 5 strikeouts. Bobby Witt Jr. has like a 36% strikeout rate, went 0-4, still looking for his first home run. Meanwhile, veteran basher backstop Sal Perez smashed a couple of home runs on Tuesday. But at some point, even Witt might be looking to get sort of hitting lower in the lineup. And then I didn't even mention Julio Rodriguez, kind of stuck there in the bottom third of that lineup, not doing too well himself. How do you feel about these rookies in general? And what is it about the fact that they're is a trend here, right? I mean, these are guys that were a couple of them like really high picks, high spends in FAAB for Bryson Stott a couple of weeks ago. I mean, these guys are young for the most part. I mean, Julio, especially 21 years old, that 46% strikeout rate. Wow. At some point they'll figure it out, right? Or do they get sent down? Like, how do you break it down as far as who gets sent down? Who's the last man standing here?
I think the first one to get sent down probably is Julio Rodriguez. I thought I saw a stat from Rob Friedman, Pitching Ninja, that said he had 9 or 10 strikeouts looking already this season. And I think the reason, or the post that he was making, is there's obviously always a lot of chatter on the internet about when are we going to get robot umps. And quite frankly, I don't love the idea, but that's a totally different podcast that we can discuss this about. But there were some borderline pitches that he took that were called strikes, and they probably weren't. It also seemed a little bit like, for me, Vlad, when I watch the strikeouts, of when you get to 2 strikes, you got to pull the trigger on, if it's anything close at all, you got to put the ball or put the bat to try to put the ball in play. And he took them. To have that many strikeouts looking when you're striking out 46% of the time, he's obviously swinging and missing a ton, but he's not getting the bat off his shoulder quite a bit either. So I think that's probably a bit more disconcerting with what's going on for him. The Bryson Stott thing was the darling that won the job. And I'll be honest, Alec Bohm is an absolute mess. It looks like he's in his head from a defensive perspective, but he is pounding left-handed pitching right now. And so the thing that's intriguing to me is Alec Bohm's hit tool coming out of Wichita State was always that's probably his, premium spot. The scary part for Bryson Stott owners is if Alec Bohm continues to hit, I think they'll find a way to try to get his bat into the lineup. And is that at the expense of Bryson Stott? I don't know. I don't know how that situation is going to play out, but they've clearly shown and Alec Baum's always been a hit first tool guy. So he's probably another one I'm worried about. Bobby Witt Jr., the Royals seem to be giving him an extremely long leash. When I went back through his spot in the batting lineup in the last 5 days, the dude has hit second or third in every single game. So he's clearly locked in. I think they're going to be really long with him. You mentioned that Julio Rodriguez is 21. Bobby Witt's also 21. But I think that they're kind of saying, look, we got a bunch of young talent right now. We're going to let him play. I think he's probably got the longest leash of all four that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. So I would say I'm the most concerned about Julio Rodriguez. They sent, I think, keep me honest here, I think they sent Jared Kelenic down last year when he struggled, and then he came back up and he was a little bit better. Mm-hmm. I could see him doing something like that for Rodriguez, but I don't know. How do you call it? Do you see it the same way that I do, or is it very different?
On the exact same page, my friend, exact same page. I think Bobby Witt has an extended leash, and he's going to continue to get it. And at some point, he'll figure it out. It may not be tomorrow, maybe in a couple of weeks. Perhaps it'll come down to him hitting lower in the lineup, but it's not going to be him getting sent down to the minors. I don't think it gets to that point. Of course, anything can happen. With Bryson Stott, I think you nailed it on the head unless he picks it up soon, which he may not be able to do if he does not get consistent at bats. I think it is really important for a player to sort of be in the lineup every day. You're not a big time prospect and then sitting and basically platooning with another basically good hitter in Alec Baum. So there's definitely a situation there. And I pulled back my bids. We had our 10-team cut line FAAB period with two. It's basically two FAAB periods for the entire season. You got $1,000 for the year. I know you have done really well in cut lines in the past, but I really pulled back on my Bryson Stott bids. And same thing with CJ Abrams. It's this kid again, also 21, right? And hitting near the bottom of the lineup. He's not really, hitting all that well. He's putting the bat to the ball, and there could be something there at some point, but he's going to have to figure it out before Fernando Tatis comes back, right?
Exactly.
Unless he plays in the outfield or something like that. And Seattle has a situation as well, because it does not make sense to allow Julio Rodriguez to continue to struggle in the lineup. Yeah. You do have Mitch Haniger probably coming back from COVID soon. Kyle Lewis will be back in the lineup at some point as well. So they have guys. It would be a sad day when you see Julio Rodriguez getting sent down and Dylan Moore getting at bats. But hey, exactly. It's very, very possible here. So yeah, it's a nice reminder for us, at least at this point in the season, to pump the brakes a little bit. I understand Julio Rodriguez. Okay, all of a sudden he's 180 overall. Then another couple good spring training games. Now he's 100. Wait, main event. You're spending $1,700 a team, and now you're spending a third, fourth round pick on him. At some point, you just got to kind of pump the brakes and be like, wait.
Yeah, and before we leave this, one person I wanted to ask you about, and think about the Padres for a little bit, because I'm curious to get your take on it. What are you thinking about Hasan Kim? Given these struggles, we know Tatis is coming back, right? So the guy has played shortstop, I believe, 3 of the last 4 days. But are we writing him off just altogether? Jurickson Profar's been solid in the outfield, and they've got Trent Grisham probably playing center field, and they got Will Myers and right, and Profar probably playing in left. But so Tatis comes back, right? He's going to play shortstop, which probably shoves Abrams or Kim to a bench role. Kim put up some monster numbers in the KBO. Are we just saying now, he's not good? He wasn't great last year. He didn't find his path to playing time. He did put up, almost 8 home runs, 6 steals. He almost got to 10-10. What are you doing with him? Or is he just a non-factor in any format? Or do you think, is there a way Abrams struggles, Tatis doesn't come back for another month, Kim flashes, and then he's a role player versus a part-time bench bat?
That's probably what is going to end up happening. I actually foresee CJ Abrams just back down at some point. That's kind of how I see it. Let him regain his confidence down in the minors for a little bit. Obviously the KBO, it's not even the Japanese league, right? This is not it's not the same quality of league, and guys that have gone there and dominated, they come back out here. It doesn't hit it doesn't hit for most of them, right? Even guys, a couple guys have gone and fixed things and then come back and things have worked out for them. Yeah. Hasan Kim was really, really good, in the KBO last year, struggled this year. Man, I picked him up. I this was my week, right? I mean, this is the week, 5 lefties. You got to do something. And then looking at Monday, he did nothing, hitting 8th on Tuesday, 0 for 3 in the lineup so far as the game's going here. And yeah, I mean, it's just like he's just going to be one of those fringe guys that at some point he'll heat up and he'll steal a bunch of bases, hit some homers. He'll kind of go through a streak, and you hope to just have that on your team when it does. But the only thing that's really keeping us attached to him, honestly, is the 3-position eligibility. It's the case on NFBC and some other sites, right? I mean, it's like, I'm not dropping Hasan Kim in my cut line, and I don't really want to drop him in a 12 or 5 lefties. Hey, let's rock them. Let's see what we can get out of them here. Yeah, at some point, but I don't know.
Yep, fair enough.
So yeah, that about covers it on these hitters starting off cold. Recently picked up guys. This is both in 12s and 15s. I mean, we saw over this past weekend the insane helium on Taylor Ward. I mean, most people that play fantasy know Taylor Ward. He's a former first-round pick. He's been in the, he's not a young guy as far as baseball is concerned. He's 28 years old. Usually mashes in the minors. He's got some power, got some speed, a little bit of everything, but for whatever reason, has always just been one of those guys that hasn't been able to stick in the major league lineup. They're always giving somebody else a chance. So he's finally called up. Comes in on Saturday and gets a combo meal. I forgot somebody said they don't like the combo meal thing, but hey, that's what it's called right now. Combo meal, a home run and a stolen base. That's what we got out of Taylor Ward on a Saturday. Sunday, another hit, nothing spectacular, but he's hitting like 3rd. Then he was hitting 4th. The other day he's hitting 2nd. And guess what? He goes from somebody that people thought they might sneak under the radars to I'm seeing 15% of budget spent on this guy. And are we thinking long term? Are we thinking like, okay, now he's just in? Because why would you spend 150 for like a 2-3 week rental? If you're spending that much, it's either I just have to have him, like we don't have the discipline to control ourselves, or it's like I just see him being a part of this lineup like for the remainder of the season because the way that Madden plays things, now maybe I'll send down Adele. Brandon Marsh is not good. I'll sit him against lefties. Like, so I don't really know. I've always been a Taylor Ward fan as like a waiver pickup when he was cheap, when I can get him for like a few bucks and he had catcher eligibility, but I really don't know. Like, I can't tell you that I see the future of Taylor Ward in 2022.
Yeah, I think the hardest part with Taylor Ward, one of the things that I try to just use as a rough outline for prospects, right, is I love weighted RC plus for prospects. So I try and go and see, like, do you have these numbers that pop off the page, or are they fairly middling and something strange sticks out? When you look at Taylor Ward historically, you see some just absolutely ridiculous numbers that are there, right? So it starts to pique your interest a bit. I'm not sure, Vlad, that I'm sold on the power. He did hit 27 home runs in 2019 in AAA, but there's not these numbers that you see him in the minors that think, okay, it's going to be probably 30 home run power as a major leaguer. But he does provide enough in the way of maybe a 15 to 20 homer season and maybe 15 to 20 steals. The concerning part is the ISO numbers aren't great, really, in any stop for an extended period of time. It feels a bit flash in the panty for me, and so probably some wasted FAAB bids. He's always had a really good batting eye. He's got 9 stops with a double-digit walk rate, so the guy sees the ball well. I struggle with, I'm very guilty of thinking that everybody develops in a linear fashion, meaning prospects should all come at the same time. And when you get to your 5th or 6th major league season, you are where you are. That's clearly not true. I just struggle, man, with Taylor Ward because he has been a solid play, but I don't know that it's, a huge pop number. I don't know that it's a huge steal number, but to your point, he's playing and he's batting in the middle of what could potentially be a really productive lineup. If the bubble wrap ever gets off Anthony Rendon, it's a great lineup, right? So, I don't know. I'm probably a bit skeptical, and I'm probably a seller more than I am a buyer if I was going to frame it up that way. But I did not spend 15% of my FAAB this weekend on Taylor Ward, if that gives you some context.
Yeah, it's funny. Like sometimes when you've played in certain formats, whether it's NFBC, Yahoo, wherever you're playing, you kind of get a feel for your league and what's going to happen. And you can just really feel that strong helium coming on. And I don't think anybody was thinking, hey, I think everyone was kind of thinking the same thing. Ooh, I'm going to sneak in a Tyler Ward bid. But then when people started talking about it, word started coming out, he hit cleanup on Sunday. It's like, okay, if I want him, I got to get him, and maybe there's something here. Yeah, I mean, I purposely, I guess I ended up with no Taylor Wards, not that I don't like them, but it's just like I kind of held those bids back. It was 20s, 30s. I think maybe one I did like 52, just on a team where I had a bunch of money, and I just knew I wasn't going to get him, and that's exactly how it worked out. And at that point, you just kind of, I mean, just let's be real. At that point, you don't have a player. You kind of rooting against him. I mean, you don't want the bad roto karma, but you just you don't want him to like explode, and you'd be wrong. Another guy. Obviously it's been the Quan Fest sizzled real quick after he hit 125 last week. I still think he's going to be a phenomenal contact hitter. He'll go through a stretch where he's stealing some bases. He'll be just fine. But Owen Miller is now in the mix. He's hitting 500 on the season. A very nice start to the year. Showing good plate discipline, strong ISO. Again, it's only 33 plate appearances, but a 545 base percentage, 464 ISO. I mean, this is madness. And he's not a big power guy, not a big steals guy. Maybe gets you a little bit of both, but a decent contact tool, right? I mean, like he's a good hitter. He's hit for average in the minors, back in the days of the Padres and AAA with Cleveland. So there is something to like here. But I just wonder how things shake out. I mean, is he somebody you could see hitting second consistently, or is that Quan spot? Is he a bottom of the order guy? Like what's your take on Owen Miller?
I could see him up in the lineup. I hate to be, the Debbie Downer from the Saturday Night Live skit or the wet blanket, but he's another one too that just, the power profile in the minors, not a ton there. He had a 192 ISO last year in AAA. Came up to the big leagues, had a 105 ISO and a 27% strikeout rate. Not a ton of pop in general in the minors when you look at it. In 2018, his debut season, again, he was young. He was 21 coming out of college. 4 homers in about 330 plate appearances, so not a ton of pop. I just get nervous, and I actually had a discussion with somebody on the interwebs today about that. I think when you're trying to think about, you got to average in an NFBC league in a 12 or 15 roughly. Got to have about 80 runs, 80 RBIs, 20 homers. And you can make up power in a lot of ways, but it's not like Owen Miller is going to get you 40 steals. He's probably going to get you 5 at best. So if you're going to get 5 steals, and that's probably a stretch. That's probably a very liberal use of how many steals he's going to get. I don't know that I see Vlad a 20 home run season from him. Maybe that's his ceiling. I don't see it, but I do see a top of the order bat. You're right. He has shown great plate discipline. The interesting part is, in a couple of seasons ago, I mean, he had a 3.5% walk rate in high A. So that's a little bit scary. So again, probably another sell for me. I'm not super excited about it, but man, if you had him somehow on a roster and you got to lock in that 500 average with some goodness, good for you, because I certainly didn't have it.
Yeah. And the way it'll probably shake out is, you now have Josh Naylor back, and as Naylor's dealt with a bunch of injury issues over the years, and he's back in. Josh Naylor being in the mix, who can play both first base and outfield, essentially just keeps Owen Miller at second base. But you got Andres Jimenez in the mix, and Andres Jimenez hasn't been in the lineup too frequently lately because the Cleveland Guardians have played a lot of lefties. So there's a lot of moving and shifting there. And then you got Bobby Bradley, who's pretty much out of the mix. The guy didn't start for like a week. And then ironically, he was in the lineup on Sunday against the lefty. It was really kind of weird. Obviously, They haven't played because of rain out so far this week. So yeah, we'll see how it shakes out there. But Owen Miller will at least be playing, I think, pretty much every day. At some point, he just might, may just not play every single day. There's just a lot of bodies there, a lot of bats. So I'm just lukewarm from him. If I was to give a projection, he's hit 12. He's hit 2 homers so far. I'll say he ends up with 12 homers, a 281 average, and 6 stolen bases.
That's certainly a usable line, but I don't think it's anything like you mentioned, some crazy FAAB bids. I don't know there's anything to break the bank on for sure.
So since I have the pleasure of your first appearance of the year here, and your masterful work with closers and with relievers, let's talk some closers. Let's talk about it. Let's break it down. First of all, it seems like things have been pretty steady. Again, it's been less than 2 weeks of the season, or just about at that 2 week point. But it hasn't been as wild, and there's going to get some wildness. There's going to be some wildness at some point. People will lose their jobs. Lots of money will be spent in FAAB on these guys. But let's start at the top. Obviously Liam Hendricks apparently was tipping his pitches. He's fixed it. He's looked better the last couple games. Josh Hader has been lights out, of course, as always. You just know he's going to be there near the top. But how do you feel about Jordan Romano? He's had a lot of save opportunities. You knew that the situation was great for him so long as they weren't going to sign someone in the preseason, like a trade for Kimbrel or get Kenley. They trust him, and he looks legit, right? I mean, where does he fit in? Is he in that top 3 now? I know we don't overact based on 2 weeks, but doesn't he have a shot at being the RP1 on the year?
I do. I think so. I think you're exactly right. That's about probably one of the only things I feel like I've really nailed this so far is I had Jordan Romano as my relief pitcher number 5 to start the year. I just thought the opportunity, like you mentioned, they could win a pile of ball games, and his stuff is just downright disgusting. The biggest thing was, are the Blue Jays going to get into a slugfest and be on top of an 11-9 game in the 9th inning, or are they going to be behind 11-9? Because, with Kikuchi and some of the arms there, they've really struggled a bit. But I think he's definitely got a chance to be top 3. He's got everything you could possibly want. I am buddies with Chris Oliver, who won the online in 2019. He's from St. Louis as well. And one thing he told me was he's always trying to find that unicorn reliever. And he had a couple of thresholds, right? But you're looking for that 30 to 40 save guy. But the biggest thing that keeps you in contention is, can your reliever strike out 100 guys? And Jordan Romano can strike out 100 batters. He's one of those few guys that can give you that massive K upside that you can get that takes your pitching staff from that 1,100-1,200 K range up to that 1,300-1,400 K range that vaults you up in that point category if you're not streaming starters. So totally agree with you. I think Romano does have a shot at being top 3. Probably has a chance at number 1. If the NL Central wasn't so bad, and I thought Hader wasn't going to save probably 50 freaking games, I think stop him there. But you never know. Romano could get into that weird 40 save area because I think he's got 6 maybe already, like you mentioned, and he's just going to get probably a pile of opportunities for sure.
Yes. I do regret not getting enough Jordan Romano. It was just one of those things where right when you thought you had a chance, swipe. There's always somebody that likes him more than you. So I noticed a lot of people were kind of off the Aroldis Chapman train. And so far early on, I mean, I don't know your impressions, but looks like, what would it take for him to lose that job and give Chad Green or Jonathan Loiseja an opportunity here? Or does he have a pretty long leash, or would he really have to just get absolutely slammed and blow a bunch in a row?
I think he'd have to. I think with the contract situation and his tenure, I think it's got to be the latter. I think he's going to have to get lit up multiple times. I don't think it's a stuff thing. I think, the velocity is fine. It's not vintage Chapman, but it's good enough. But the guys that you mentioned have just lights out stuff. If you took everything, if you took all the extracurriculars aside, I think you could see a move to one of the righties in the pen, but I think they're going to stick with Chapman until, he just gets hit repeatedly in multiple outings in a row, and maybe they have a phantom elbow issue or shoulder that pops up and put him on the DL or IL, and then he's out for a bit.
And another guy, man, this is just, I tweeted it the other day, I am a Dodger fan, so I don't like the Padres and I don't like the Giants. I didn't say hate because I don't really hate much. There's very little. I hate, I hate people that hate things and that are negative and all that. But as far as baseball, what? I love Brandon Belt, and he's a San Francisco Giant. He's my most rostered player this season. I love Taylor Rogers. He's my most rostered closer. I did not expect this. There is just something about him being in a San Diego uniform. And I see the Padres always up just by a couple runs when they're winning a game. And I'm like, it's Rogers time. And it feels so good. And I hope I can ride this train for the duration of the season. And then he is a top guy. But again, I'm not trying to kind of, pat myself on the back, but there was a period of time when I was a Robert Suarez guy. It was tough figuring out who was going to be the closer in that pen. Remember even you and I were we're talking about San Diego closer. And you told me, I know he closed in Japan. I don't know. And you were right. It was the perfect confluence of events with Rogers getting traded there. But the back pat part of it was he got traded the day of opening day, I believe, right?
Yep.
Taylor Rogers and Robert Suarez came in for an opportunity that day for his first major league start after and after leading the majors. The Japanese league JPL 2 years in a row in saves. He just had the shakes. Didn't work out for him. He had a really bad outing. The very next day, Taylor Rogers' first appearance, just nailed it. And so, man, I was really happy to see that. And I mean, he's been a dominant lefty reliever, one of the best for many years. I know he was injured for a little bit there in 2020 and 2021. So, but those numbers before that, like we're talking about like a 2.5 ERA over the course of 2018 and 2019, along with like a 30% strikeout rate back then. I mean, there could be really something nice here. There is a chance at least top 10, I think, is good. I think maybe even top 6 is possible.
I agree. If you look at some of his past numbers, right, and you use that metric that I mentioned from Chris Oliver in the past, he has a 90 strikeout season in 2019. And that was, he had a 32% K rate. But if you go under the hood a little bit more, his swinging strike rate in 2019 was only 10.9%. So probably a little bit of an outlier, a little bit of luck. He's bumped that up 3 ticks or 2.5 ticks to 13.2%. So if you get a healthy Taylor Rogers in there all year, I think you're absolutely right. I think you could get a 35 save, 100 strikeout season, which is just unicorn gold out of the bullpen. That's the perfect place that you're trying to get to with your reliever 1. And if somehow you had the gift of he's your reliever 2, holy cow, you are cooking with gas at this point. Cause I think he could be in that mix. I mean, there's no reason if the Padres are winning a bunch of close games, Blake Snell comes back, continues to give him good innings. Yu Darvish has looked good in 2 of his 3 starts. You could see it being a tight game and he gets plenty of opportunities. Now I do think you're right. I think Robert Suarez lurks. Pierce Johnson's been good. They got a pile of arms. So I don't know who the next guy up is, but I think they're going to just use Rogers over and over and over again in that role.
Any concern? I'm seeing a slight dip in velocity on both his fastball and his slider. So last season was kind of tops. It was 95, 96 on average. Prior to that, it was usually in the 94s. He's right at 93.9 miles per hour. Taylor Rogers on his fastball. Anything to that there? I mean, I haven't really thought. I
think it's a little concerning, but I think the other thing you got to recognize too is over time he's gone. He's a 2-pitch pitcher, right? He's fastball, slider. He's up that slider usage, and I think that's great for whiffs. That does give you a little bit less of a feel. I mean, the less that you have it seems like it goes hand in hand for whatever reason. If you're playing in some kind of dynasty format, I'm not sure that I'm buying Taylor Rogers in that regard, because that could indicate some problems in the future. But for this year, I don't think you have anything to worry about. Of course, you want him to be there, but I think he's going to be fine.
I mean, not much really to say about Daniel Bard other than, hey, he got a few save opportunities and he's been holding it down. I saw him shut down the Dodgers 1-2-3 the other day, and nice little story there considering he didn't pitch in the majors for 7 seasons. Came back to Colorado, and then last season was a great first half, and then lost the job. But at the end of the day, 20 saves there. Alex Colomé will probably get some saves, but. Any concern there with Daniel Bard? Do you think he holds a job for the year?
Yeah, that's a confusing one for me because he doesn't really have the career pedigree that says he's a lockdown closer. I think you could see a handful of people in the mix, like you mentioned. They used, I believe Carlos Esteves, had quite a few. Alex Colomé, I could see him mixing and matching there. I think it's him, and they'll use him for as long as possible. He seems like a dude that is just ripe to be traded at the trade deadline as a right-handed relieving arm to maybe a contending team for pennies on the dollar. But I think he's fine for now. He's serviceable, right? He's the Sean Chacon when he's saved, whatever it was, 35 games with a 5 or 6 ERA. That's probably what Daniel Bard's going to end up being this year.
Speaking of the 5.6 ERA with a bunch of saves, what about Jorge Lopez? Is he going to hold down that job for the whole year? I mean, everybody's talking about the one. He's a different guy when he's just pitching 1 inning coming in there. But
I mean,
by the way, I'm sorry, just to kind of add on to that. Did you notice? I know it's just been a week and a half, and they haven't played that many games at home, but the Baltimore pen has been decent. The starters have been decent. And they've only allowed one home run so far, at least through like I think Monday's games or something like that. Only one home run allowed, like a 2 ERA. What's I don't know what's going on.
It's got to be that wall, right? The wall has changed everything. It's changed the entire. I don't know. You had a good call with Bruce Zimmerman last week. That is not a staff that I expected a whole lot of. I think there were some jokes about Phil Dussault and him loving. Was it
Jordan Lyles?
Jordan Lyles, who's been pretty decent. I mean, there's just been a bunch of arms there. I don't think that the Orioles are obviously contending this year, so I don't think they care who they put out for the ninth. As we assess the closer situation, Paul Fry is a guy I've really liked out of that pen, but he hasn't gotten the opportunity, and Lopez has been pretty decent. But honestly, that's one that I think have called as a committee or a shaky situation at best. I think it's going to be Lopez. I don't think it's going to be, Cesar Valdez throwing 17 straight changeups in a row. Lopez seems to have a little bit better stuff than that. But we'll kind of see how that goes. It's definitely a unique situation for sure.
And we'll see. This game is way over by the time you're listening to this, but the Orioles are down 2-1 in the 7th inning. And we'll see if they can get a couple of runs. I mean, isn't it just the pits? This Baltimore. I mean, Baltimore offense actually crushes Oakland's offense. I mean, Mullins, Mountcastle, Santander, Mancini, Hayes are like 50 times better than Sean Murphy and his band of traveling NorCalers.
Yeah,
man. Sorry, Jen said. Committee in Kansas City: Scott Barlow, Josh Stallmont, or is it Barlow the lead?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards Stallmont. You asked me the question of who do I see? There's two guys in a month that I think could take and run with jobs. I think it's Josh Stallmont, and I believe, and I'm going to butcher his name, I believe it's Joan Duran of the Minnesota Twins. Mm-hmm. Those are two guys I think May 15th, Memorial Day, that we could see at that job. Stallmont's got great stuff. I owned him in a lot of places last year and didn't work out. But man, he was impressive when I saw him lock down a save, I believe, over the weekend, if I'm remembering when it was correctly. Just filthy stuff. And I believe that Barlow's got actually pretty good stuff too. That's another pen that's quietly impressive. They traded for Amir Garrett right before the season started, so they've got some pieces there in place. But I like Stallmont over Barlow. I think it's Barlow's job for now. He seems to be the high leverage guy that they're using. But man, when you watch Stallmont pitch, he's that lockdown guy that's got all the tools to be successful.
Yeah, he does kind of give me those closer vibes, right? I mean, and they're not that far in age. Actually, Barlow's 29 and Stallmont's 28. For whatever reason, I thought he was he was a little younger. But you know what? It's a good problem for Kansas City to have, and bad for fantasy managers. But they are both good, solid relievers. I've got no issue with either of them. I don't have either of them on any of my 30 teams. At some point, I would love to grab Stallmont if he gets dropped and I had the availability to add him. So yeah, I'm on board with you. I think last season ran into a little bit of bad luck. They were doing the committee thing for quite a while. They had Greg Holland. They had random guys grabbing saves, and then Stallmont had the job and then got hurt and then, got blasted. And I don't know. Anyways, it ended up just being sort of a mess all year. And it could end up being kind of a cleaner mess in a way this year with just those two guys, either depending on, how they want to do it. But I think both guys can handle it. And then you mentioned John Duran. I mean, cat's out of the bag there. He is a legit arm. I think everybody loves him. The only question marks were, would Minnesota look to try to pawn Tyler Duffy off and maybe get him some save opportunities so that they can trade him at a higher value.
Yep. No, it makes sense. I mean, another guy with just absolutely electric stuff, triple digit fastball, gave up a home run on a splitter, I believe, to Christian Vasquez over the weekend. And then of course he was diagnosed on COVID-19. But a great arm. I really think he takes the job by Memorial Day. I would not be surprised in the least if he's available in your leagues. Throw the spec couple dollar bid. That's hard on NFBC with the limited bench spots, but I love him this year.
We'll close things up on the closer talk here with just a couple of more bullpens. You got Miami, the Marlins, who obviously they aren't winning many games to give their guys opportunities to do so. But Anthony Bender, it's been a mix. He's been Another guy that was supposed to be like the closer of the future, but it's been sort of a little bit of some shakiness along the way, and a blown save and some runs given up. But what happens in Miami when Dylan Floro returns? We know that Don Mattingly likes to just use one guy. You've got Bender, you got Floro in the mix. You got two other guys like Tanner Scott, Cole Sulser. You got all these like guys that can close. So just to kind of end things with that, and then also Houston, you've got Ryan Presley, everyone concerned with the velo dip and the IL stint with the knee drain, and everybody loves Hector Neris. A lot of people want to see Hector Neris become a thing. So let's talk about those two.
Yeah, so for me, you hit the nail on the head. Mattingly's, I think, going to pick one guy and stick with it. And I honestly, Vlad, I would tell you, I was shocked that Dylan Floro saved 15 games last year. He does not have the traditional profile that I think would say, holy cow, I've got to go out and get that guy. He's my RP1. Almost a double-digit walk rate last year at 9.3%, a 23% strikeout rate. So what we would probably call pretty middling marks for a relief pitcher. But he got the job done. He's never flashed a ton of swing and miss ability, had one season that topped 10.5% in swinging strike rate for his career. So the guy doesn't scream, that lockdown role. So I think Bender's got the job and he's done okay. Like you mentioned, a couple of shaky outings, a couple of saves. I just get nervous that a guy like Mattingly goes back to Old Faithful, and Floro did it and did a really nice job. The one thing Floro does an excellent job is he throws that two-seam sinker and gets a ton of ground balls. He does not give up a ton of home runs, which I can understand there being some comfort in that. Being a Cardinals fan and watching Jason Isringhausen walk two batters and then give up a home run was freaking maddening all the time. And so I get it if a manager wants to stick with a guy like Floro because he may put some guys on, but he doesn't give up home runs. So that's how I see Miami. Like you said, that Baltimore trade was also confusing because then they just added basically some spec guys that I also liked for 5 to 15 saves. So I'm betting Bender gets the chance to run with it, but I wouldn't put it past Don Mattingly to give the job back to Floro if there's a struggle or injury or anything like that.
I just realized I feel bad for the people that try to do I don't know if is anybody out there in the world that's done it, but if so, I feel bad for you. If you try to handcuff Bender with Floro in a draft, and in that same draft, Tanner Scott with Cole Sulser.
Yeah.
And you got them all on one team. That would be pretty funny.
Yeah, that's brutal for sure.
Any last thing about Hector Neris?
Yeah, Presley? So that one actually does concern me. I think if you think about how a front office operates, they gave Brian Presley a ton of money. And they did that for a reason. They thought he was going to be the guy there. I would tell you, I know what they're saying publicly, and I don't have any insight into that front office. So I don't know anything. I didn't play with anybody that's still connected into that front office. That knee drain frightens me. Of course, the velo is going to dip. So that's probably, they go hand in hand, right? But I would tell you that's a concerning situation. And like you mentioned, I think as fantasy owners, we probably all owned Hector Neris 1 or 2 or 3 times. But the dude does have nasty stuff. It's a team that's going to win a bunch of games in the AL West. So if you can figure out the skeleton key in that bullpen and Neris is the guy, you just lucked into a bunch of really nice save opportunities there. Honestly, I don't know what to do there because if you drafted Presley, and I don't know that I have any Presley shares, Vlad, I'm not sure if you do or not, you probably spent up to get Presley. So you're not dropping him, obviously, as a top 100 or a top 120 pick, but I would be very nervous right now if I was a Ryan Presley fantasy owner because there's not a lot of great signs there. He does seem to have Dusty Baker's confidence because I believe he had an IL stint last year and came right back into the closer role. So I think he's got the job while he's healthy, but I am nervous about that one for sure.
Yeah. And of course, with Hector Neris, I think we've seen some issues with him in the past as well, right? I mean, with Philadelphia and you're right. He's got nasty stuff. If you really just kind of take the name brand of Ryan Presley out and how great he's been the last couple of years, he is a better pitcher, closer, reliever than Hector Neris, but not that much better. So, of course, if he's shaky, there's issues. I don't think that it's just. I think people with Presley that now have Neris need to just kind of hold on for a little bit and see what happens. Sure. Hopefully you don't have a lot of stashes there. let's end everything with just a quick early look at free agent bidding for the upcoming weekend, which means for the following week, which would be week 4. And it's early, of course. There's going to be so much that takes place over the next few days and before Sunday, and even on Sunday, that will affect how much we are spending, in what order we are bidding on players. I'm just going to throw out a gaggle of names. You tell me if anyone sticks out. Tell me if there's anyone that I'm missing, just sort of giving that look ahead. First off, Roansy Contreras for the Pittsburgh Pirates. A couple weeks ago, or a week ago, we heard that he was going to be slowly stretched out into the rotation, but through middle relief. So, a couple innings here, a couple innings there. He's been pretty good. On Tuesday, he had a nice little outing, came in after J.D. Brubaker. He had 3 innings, gave up 1 run, 5 strikeouts. Kid looks really good. I picked him up on all 3 of my main events. A couple of them I got cheap 2 weeks ago, and then again this past weekend for a little bit more, I think like in the 50s. So I'm in on him. He's going to get into that rotation at some point. Someone's going to fall out, right? It's not a strong rotation whatsoever. The kid's going to get in there. He's going to be their best starting pitcher. So we've got him. Some of other people's panic drops, guys like Zach Eflin, people drop because he had a bad start. Now he's going to get Coors Field this week. Probably another bad start there. I believe that game is on Wednesday. And then more people will drop him. But the following week, Zach Eflin gets a nice 2-step, with one of them being against Colorado, but at home. Ryan Reed Detmers, I feel like people, because he hasn't been all that great on the 6-man rotation, people are going to be dropping him. Pick him up if you can. Nick Senzel's season as the end starts on April 29th when they go to Colorado. I said it a couple weeks ago. I'm probably wrong, but that's what I'm saying. I'm going with it. Cheap Diamondbacks being dropped. The schedule isn't beautiful the next couple of weeks, but these guys are like, nobody cares about them. Pavin Smith, David Peralta, Christian Walker. These guys will warm up at some point. Not the best offensive target, but still. And finally, some San Francisco Giant lefty bats. Mike Yastrzemski, I saw him drop by about 20% of teams in the 12-team OCs. Jock Peterson, pick him up if you haven't already. Cleanup hitter against righties. And Lamont Wade is back soon. So any thoughts on those guys and anyone I miss, and just your sort of final thoughts for today?
I do like Senzel. He's been a guy that, you and I think have talked about. So he's definitely one that sticks out for me. I do like Lamonte Wade Jr. and Jock Peterson, like you mentioned too. Those are bats that stick out for me. There was one I was going to ask you about, and it's in the, I want as many pieces of the Toronto Blue Jays offense as humanly possible. I saw, and so kind of DHing now with Teoscar Hernandez out, Zach Collins from the left side looks like he's been DHing quite a bit. And then Kevin Biggio has been dropped almost universally in leagues that I'm in. Looks like he's in a bit of a timeshare with Raimel Tapia, either in the outfield. At the second base spot, it looks to be somewhat platooning with Santiago Espinal, but Espinal's really got the job, it looks like. How are you handling that weird trio quad of Collins, Tapia, Espinal, and Biggio? Do any of them excite you at all?
I mean, Espinal excites me from a real baseball perspective because he's good at it. He's a good bottom of the lineup guy. Zach Collins will hold down the fort, I think, platoon bat against righties, because Alejandro Kirk is mainly DHing for the most part. So Zach Collins, Reese McGuire handling the catcher duties there. But Zach Collins, another home run on Tuesday. Nice little FAAB bat. I think some people picked him up over this past weekend as well. Danny Jansen with the oblique, that's going to be a bit of time. Yeah. So I do think Collins is a sharp pickup. Just anyone that's on Toronto, probably other than Kevon. And was hitting cleanup. I mean, anyone other than, I guess, Kevon Biggio. And man, I hate to mention Rob Silver's name every week on a podcast, but this week I will again, because he was right. He's just like, do not draft Kevin Biggio. He's not good.
Yeah.
And I did anyways, because it was like, hey, it's pick 312. Like, why wouldn't I take him? The guy could hit 15 homers and steal 20 bags. I don't care if he's a bad average. I'll time him when he's up against righties. Well, guess what? Kevon Biggio still doesn't have a hit. I think he's like the only guy with at least 20 at bats without a hit.
Stinks.
So I mean, obviously a lot of time before FAAB gets going. Any last thoughts just about anything in general, life, baseball, and final words here, since you came on as really appreciate you coming on as a FTN staff on the pod today.
No, thanks for having me. I like podcasting. It's just been a bit hectic with some work and personal stuff going on. So thanks for having me on. Baseball wise, no, I'm just looking for, I'm looking for going to a baseball game. I haven't been to a baseball game since pre-pandemic, which is horrible to say, but just hasn't worked out with my schedule and some other things. So I'm looking forward to getting back to the ballpark, seeing the Cardinals play a couple of teams. I've always had this vision of taking my son to see a bunch of different stadiums. And now that he's old enough, then the pandemic happened and I haven't been able to do that. So I'm excited to get out on the road this summer, hopefully with some warmer weather, turning things around soon. I coached my kids last week in sleet and freezing rain, and it was 35 degrees. And I think we're going to be 80 degrees on Thursday or Friday. So I'm holding out hope. It's going to be May soon in the Midwest. It's warm. It warms up a bit because I am freaking tired of this weather. But I've mentioned the weather twice, which really makes me feel middle-aged at this point. But no, thanks for having me on. It was a bunch of fun.
Yeah, and enjoy your season. The St. Louis Cardinals look like one badass team and going to be quite a threat there in the NL Central. And that's a great idea for me as well. I definitely want to be able to hit up a Dodger game soon. In fact, I'll probably go look at tickets after this. So thank you once again so much for coming on. Hope you guys all enjoyed the pod. And that's it. We'll catch you next week for Matt Kupferle. I'm Vlad Sedler. This is the FTN Fantasy Baseball Podcast, and we'll talk to you next week.